Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Dare to Dream. We are going to learn Geography of Class 8 from the MBoSE Syllabus. We are going to learn Chapter 3, that is Natural Vegetation and Wildlife. So let us have a look at these two terms, natural vegetation and wildlife. When different types of plants grow naturally without human interference, they are referred to as natural vegetation. So natural vegetation basically means all kinds of plants. Now, under all kinds of plants, we have got trees, we have got bushes, shrubs, desert vegetation like cactus. So all these things comes under natural vegetation. Now the next term is wildlife. Wildlife refers to all animals, birds and living organisms which live in their natural environment. So जो भी जानवर, पंछी, जो कीड़े हैं, कीड़े मकोड़े and all other living organisms, इन सारे चीजों को wildlife कहा जाता है. Now the question comes, where can we find this natural vegetation and wildlife? हमें natural vegetation और wildlife कहाँ मिलेंगे? And the answer is natural vegetation and wildlife coexist in the biosphere. So we find all these life forms. Natural vegetation and wildlife both are kinds of life forms. So we find all these life forms in biosphere. Now the question comes, what is biosphere? The biosphere is the narrow zone of contact between the atmosphere, lithosphere and hydrosphere. In your previous classes, you must have learned about different spheres of the earth, that is atmosphere, lithosphere and hydrosphere. So atmosphere क्या होता है? हवा. Lithosphere is zameen, land, and hydrosphere is water. So biosphere is that zone or that area where all these three things comes together: the atmosphere, lithosphere and hydrosphere. The second point is all life forms exist due to the interactions between the three elements of biosphere, that is air, water and land. So all the life forms that we find in this earth, they exist only due to the interactions between the three elements, that is air, water and land. Can we survive only in air without water and land? No, we cannot survive. Similarly, we cannot survive only in water without air and land. And no life form can exist only in land without air and water. So the interactions of all these three elements of biosphere is needed for all the life forms to exist and survive. Then the next point is this life supporting system of interaction is called ecosystem. So this life supporting system of the biosphere, this whole system of interaction between the living beings and the non-living beings is called an ecosystem. Now let us have a look at this picture. This is Atmosphere. Atmosphere क्या है? हवा, the air. Next is hydrosphere, water. And thirdly, it is lithosphere, zameen. So when these three things comes together, that zone, that particular zone is known as biosphere. And we find all the living organisms only in that sphere of the earth. Now let us have a look at what is ecosystem. We have learned a few minutes back that ecosystem is a system of interdependence. So here there the ecosystem, it is a system of interdependence between the living beings and non-living things in the biosphere. This system is called ecosystem. So ecosystem is a whole system of interaction between the living beings and the non-living things. Now let us see what are non-living things. The non-living things in the biosphere are the abiotic components. They are known as abiotic components of the environment. For example, water, air, sun, soil, stars, moon, etc. These are the non-living things in the atmosphere, in the biosphere. Secondly, the living things are the biotic components of the environment. For example, plants, animals, humans, bacteria, birds, insects, all these are living things. Now here we have to remember one point, that is biotic components depends on abiotic components for their survival. This is very important and we need to remember this, that the biotic components or the living things, these things depend on the abiotic components or the non-living things for their survival. For example, the plants, animals, birds, insects, all these things are dependent on water, air, soil, sun, stars, moon, etc. for their survival. जो नॉन लिविंग थिंग्स है बायोस्फीयर में, वो सारे वो सारे चीजें लिविंग थिंग्स पे डिपेंड नहीं करते हैं अपने सर्वाइवल के लिए, बल्कि जो लिविंग थिंग्स है वो सारी चीजें नॉन लिविंग थिंग्स पे डिपेंड करते हैं अपनी सर्वाइवल के लिए. The living things cannot survive without the non-living things of the biosphere, that is water, air, soil, sun, etc. We cannot survive without water, we cannot survive without air, soil, sun. So in that way we can say that living things are dependent on non-living things of the biosphere for their existence. We will have a better understanding of ecosystem with the help of the picture, or you can say an illustration of ecosystem. Now in this picture, what can you see? You can see here the clouds, the sun, the trees, grasses, flowers. So the trees are dependent, the trees, grasses and flowers, these are dependent on the sun for making food through the process of photosynthesis. So in this way you can find an example of how the living things are dependent on the non-living things, that is sun. Next comes the birds over here, the small birds. They are dependent on the living things as well as the non-living things. You can see the birds flying in the sky as well as the birds in the ground. So they eat small insects from the grass, from the land. Moreover, they need water, they need sunlight, they need air for their existence. So in that way also, living things are dependent on non-living beings, non-living things. Next you see the fish in the water, and then the squirrel and the rabbit. So the fish is also dependent on non-living things, most essentially the water, and then air, sunlight, and then fish also eats the plants the plants that grow in water. Then the squirrel and the rabbit, they are also dependent on non-living things as well as living beings. The rabbits eats grasses, the squirrels also eats nuts, grasses, etc., seeds, etc. So this shows how they are dependent on non-living things. Next comes the deer. You can see a deer in the picture. So deer is a herbivorous animal. So herbivorous animals are plant eaters. So just because deer is a herbivorous animal doesn't mean that the deer doesn't need air, water, sunlight, etc. As a living being, it needs the plants for its survival, but it also needs air, water, sunlight for its survival. So you can see how they are dependent on the living things as well as the non-living things. So it is a kind of interaction between living things and non-living things. Now comes the tiger. The tiger is a carnivorous animal. Carnivorous animals means meat eaters. So the tiger depends on the meats. That means the tiger kills the weaker animals, that is the deer or some other small animals, and eat the meat of that animal for its survival. But it also needs air, water, and sunlight. Next, on the ground, you can see some dead living beings, some dead birds, a dead rat over there. So what happens? Gradually, when any living being grows old and dies up, or due to certain accidents, the living beings dies. जब भी कोई पंछी या जब कोई भी लिविंग बीइंग धीरे धीरे उसका उम्र बढ़ता है, तो धीरे धीरे वो मौत की तरफ जाता है, and then the animal or the bird or the living being, we can say, it dies. And what happens when it dies? Gradually the body gets decomposed. धीरे धीरे जब जमीन पे उस लिविंग बीइंग का उस प्राणी का शरीर पड़ा रहता है, तो धीरे धीरे वो शरीर सड़ने लगता है, एंड और वो शरीर धीरे धीरे डिकम्पोज होते होते मिट्टी के साथ मिल जाता है, एंड दैट इज व्हाट we call humus. We have learned in previous chapter about humus. Humus is the dead remains of animals and plants. So in that way, humus is essential for the growth of plants because it makes the land fertile. So in that way, they also contribute, these dead bodies of animals and birds, etc. These also contributes to the biosphere, and by making the land fertile. And when the land gets fertile, again trees grows up, flowers grows up, and in this way all the living beings are dependent on each other for their survival. Now you can see the human being, a man over there. So human beings are omnivorous, that is, they are plant and meat eaters. They eat plant-based food as well as meat-based food. So human beings are also an important part of this ecosystem because human beings need both plants as well as animals and the nature, that is the non-living things, sun, air, water, sunlight, all these things for its survival. So in this way, we can see a very beautiful interaction between the non-living things and the living beings. And this is what is ecosystem. We will continue with the topic in the next part of the video. Thank you for watching my video.